Hollywood's brightest stars, celebrated for their charm, beauty, and talent, were carefully polished for the screen. Yet what their bodies revealed after death, that's a story the industry never wanted told. This is not a tale of movie magic, but of the hidden truth, locked away in forensic reports that should have been routine medical procedures. But instead, they uncovered the most shocking secrets of the silver screen. These were autopsies that were more than just cause of death. They were confessions, laying bare the most sinister parts of their lives that were carefully crafted by a world that wanted to sell an image. Their makeup hid more than just imperfections. It hid the struggles, the pain, the darkness of their private lives. The scalpel, not the camera, revealed the truth. In this video, we delve into 10 autopsies that expose the darkest corners of Hollywood, the ones the public never saw. From mysterious deaths to unnatural injuries, the bodies speak where the scripts can no longer be edited. At the height of his career, Montgomery Clift was the epitome of Hollywood's delicate sensitivity. On screen, he was every woman's dream, every man's tragic hero. But behind the camera, Montgomery's life was a tumult of emotional pain, self-doubt, and substance abuse. And when his body was discovered, it told a story no one had expected. His autopsy revealed the true cost of his tortured existence, long hidden from the public eye. The official cause of death? A heart attack. But the body didn't lie. What the coroner found in brutal detail was far from natural. A heart weakened by years of excessive medication, insomnia, and alcohol abuse. But that wasn't all. There were fractures in his face, remnants of an old car accident that had never truly healed. And his stomach, full of food, but without any signs of digestion, suggested that he ate, but his body simply couldn't process it. The trauma his body had endured over the years was written all over him, in ways no one had ever seen before. Yet the most chilling discovery came from the toxicology report. Barbiturates mixed with codeine and alcohol, a lethal cocktail that hastened the inevitable collapse. The drugs didn't kill him alone, but in combination with his worn-out body, they delivered the final blow. The public never knew the true extent of his suffering. To them, Montgomery Clift was just the charming, fragile star, but his body told a different story, one of silent, relentless decay. George Reeves, the Superman of the 1950s, was found dead in his home, a gunshot wound to the head. An unfortunate end for a man whose fame was at its peak. But as always, the body told a different story. The autopsy didn't support the narrative that the world wanted to believe. Yes, powder residue was found on both of his hands, but there were no burns or contact marks on his temple, key signs that would normally accompany a self-inflicted shot. The trajectory of the bullet? Slightly angled. This was not a man who simply gave up. Something was wrong. And the questions didn't stop there. The report detailed fresh bruises on his arms, a broken tooth, and even a small cut on his scalp, indicating signs of a struggle, a fight before the shot was fired. His fiancée was home that night surrounded by guests, yet no one heard anything unusual. But neighbors reported hearing a loud argument just hours before his death. Who was George Reeves really? A man at the height of his career, with a bright future ahead of him? So why would he kill himself without leaving a single note? The press quickly sold it as sudden depression, a man on the verge of a breakdown, and Hollywood closed ranks. But buried within the coroner's report was one line that would disappear from the official summary: injuries inconsistent with a simple fall. That line was removed, covered up, and just like that, the truth slipped into the shadows. And the real story was buried with George. Errol Flynn, the dashing Hollywood icon known for his swashbuckling roles and rebellious persona, was found dead at the age of 50. The official cause of death? A sudden heart attack. But the autopsy revealed a far darker and more grotesque truth. Flynn's liver, completely destroyed, decayed, as if it had been rotting from within for years. The coroner described it as a dry sponge soaked in alcohol. His body had become a vessel of decay long before the fatal attack. His blood tested positive for alcohol, tranquilizers, and painkillers. Not a lethal dose of any one substance, but a combination that would prove fatal for a body already worn to the breaking point. His liver, heart, and kidneys, these organs had been ravaged by years of abuse, the result of a lifestyle that had pushed him to the edge. What no one saw in the bright lights of his Hollywood image was the darkness brewing beneath the surface. Internal scars from previous surgeries, a heart already pushed to its limits. These were the real signs of the life Flynn had led. Just hours before his death, he was seen drinking and joking, the picture of health. But what no one knew was that his body had been slowly fading from the inside out. Flynn's death was ruled natural causes, but the autopsy painted a different picture. This wasn't a sudden heart attack. It was the culmination of years of chronic destruction, a life lived too hard for his body to endure. In 1920, Olive Thomas was at the height of her career, the dazzling, carefree starlet who captured the hearts of moviegoers across the world. But her death in Paris, after what was officially deemed a tragic accident, would unravel a mystery that Hollywood desperately wanted to keep buried. The cause of death? Mercury chloride poisoning. But the truth the autopsy uncovered was far more sinister. The bottle of medicine she had allegedly ingested wasn't just a mistake. It was a deadly dose, one that couldn't have come from an accidental mix-up. The levels of mercury found in her system were so high, they could only have come from a single, undiluted dose. But that wasn't the most chilling part. The coroner also discovered fingernail marks on her throat, cuts on her wrists, and a loose tooth. These were signs of desperation, signs of a struggle, a woman trying to fight for her life. Why didn't anyone hear her scream? Or did she scream? But no one came to her aid. Olive Thomas's death wasn't an accident. It was a scene of terror, of resistance. And yet, her husband, Jack Pickford, was never charged. In fact, within days, the case was closed. The coroner's private note: this woman didn't die by mistake. She died in a scene that was not improvised, was left on his desk and later disappeared from the official record. Hollywood didn't just bury her body, it buried the truth. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was once Hollywood's highest-paid actor, the king of silent comedy, and a beloved figure in the industry. But by the time he died in 1933 at the age of just 46, he was a broken man, forgotten by the public, and abandoned by the studio system that had once adored him. Officially, his death was ruled a heart attack, but the autopsy revealed something far more tragic: a body ravaged by years of abuse and neglect. His cardiovascular system, long compromised, had finally failed him. The report showed severe damage to his liver and pancreas, and a bleeding ulcer that had been active for weeks. His stomach was empty, his body weak, an exhaustion that couldn't be blamed on just a heart attack. The years of alcohol, overeating, and stress had taken their toll, leaving behind a frail, worn shell of the man who had once been the life of the party. And yet, it wasn't just physical exhaustion that had destroyed Arbuckle. It was the scars of public mockery and scandal that had silently chipped away at him. After the relegations that had almost destroyed his career, Arbuckle lived in near isolation. The world no longer laughed with him, but at him. He survived the abuse of the press, but in the end, it was the abuse of his own body that claimed his life. The autopsy revealed more than just the cause of death. It was a portrait of a life slowly consumed by neglect and heartbreak. A man who had once brought so much joy to others died alone, a footnote in Hollywood's history. His death marked by the very same silence that had followed him in his final years. George Periolat, one of the most recognizable faces of silent cinema, faded into obscurity long before his death in 1940. The world had forgotten him. He was a forgotten star, a shadow from a bygone era, and no one noticed when he locked himself in his room and took cyanide. His death, once a mystery, would later be revealed through the chilling autopsy that told the story of a man crushed not just by the weight of his own despair, but by the callous indifference of an industry that had discarded him. The autopsy revealed a body neglected and deteriorated, a man who had been left to fade away in solitude, his muscles atrophied, his skin pale, and marked with pressure sores from lying in the same position for too long. The man who had once been a star was now little more than a husk, his body unable to function properly. His stomach was nearly empty and his blood sugar dangerously low. He had been living in a state of extreme depression for weeks. Periolat had no visitors, no job, no family. His life had been reduced to loneliness and neglect. The report also showed traces of non-prescribed sedatives in his system, suggesting that he had been medicating himself to cope with the crushing weight of isolation. The industry had long forgotten him, and in the end, his body betrayed the horror of that abandonment. The cyanide was just the final act in a life that had already been ruined. Hollywood didn't notice George Periolat. No one came to his aid. He died not from the poison, but from the industry that had abandoned him years before. His death was marked as a desperate decision, but the autopsy spoke louder. This was the tragic end of a man who had been forgotten. Natalie Wood, the stunning star whose beauty captivated audiences in the 1950s and 60s, was found dead in 1981 under mysterious circumstances. Officially, the cause of death was drowning, but the autopsy revealed a far more complex and troubling story. The headlines screamed accident, but the evidence in her body told a different tale. Bruises on her wrists, arms, and legs, an abrasion on her left cheek. These were not the marks of a woman who had simply fallen into the sea. The coroner's report confirmed the presence of defensive scratches, signs that Natalie had fought back, that she had tried to protect herself from something or someone. And what about the strange circumstances surrounding her death? The yacht she was on, the people she was with, her husband Robert Wagner and co-star Christopher Walken didn't seem to have clear answers about what happened that night. The official narrative painted the tragic picture of an actress overwhelmed by personal demons, but the autopsy uncovered something more sinister. There were no significant levels of alcohol in her system, no signs of disorientation. She had no apparent reason to fall into the water that night. The toxicology report was clear. This wasn't just an accident. There was something more. Something that no one wanted to address. Years later, as details continued to emerge, contradictions piled up. The captain of the yacht changed his story multiple times. The evidence didn't add up. It became clear that there were too many unanswered questions surrounding her death, and still, no one was charged. Natalie Wood's body may have floated in the water, but the truth remained submerged, trapped beneath a surface of secrets no one wanted to expose. Marilyn Monroe, the blonde bombshell who became Hollywood's most iconic symbol, was found dead in her bed in 1962. Officially, her death was ruled as an overdose, a tragic and too familiar end for a star whose life had been as turbulent as it was public. But when the autopsy was performed, it revealed a much darker and more complicated story, one that would be hidden from the public for decades. The first contradiction came from the stomach, the lack of water in her stomach, a detail that made the ingestion of pills by mouth highly unlikely. The report also noted unexplained bruises on her hip and arm, and an old hematoma on her lower back, marks that had no medical explanation. These were not the signs of a simple overdose. They pointed to something far more sinister. And then, the details of the official autopsy itself came under scrutiny. In the early reports, the cause of death was labeled probable overdose. But when the final report was released, the language had changed. Key pages were crossed out, files went missing, and critical details were simply erased from history. The once clear conclusion of Monroe's tragic death had become blurred, altered, and covered up. It wasn't just the overdose that killed Marilyn Monroe. It was the secrets she knew, the powerful people she made uncomfortable. What was erased from her autopsy was not just a cause of death, but the final act of a woman silenced by a system that had no intention of revealing the full truth. What killed Marilyn Monroe wasn't just the pills, it was the cover-up that followed her death. Rudolph Valentino, the heartthrob of the silent film era, was beloved by millions for his intense, passionate performances. But at just 31 years old, his death sent shockwaves through Hollywood, leaving fans and the industry stunned. Officially, his death was caused by peritonitis, a complication from a perforated ulcer. Yet the autopsy revealed a much more complicated and disturbing truth about the man who had once been Hollywood's most adored star. The coroner found multiple lacerations in his intestines, old tissue damage, and signs that stomach fluid had been leaking internally for days. This wasn't just a sudden burst of pain. Valentino's body had been deteriorating for a while, and the damage wasn't limited to just his stomach. The autopsy also found marks from clandestine injections in his arms and a circular hematoma on his lower back, signs of someone who had been receiving irregular, possibly self-administered treatments. In his final days, Valentino was in severe pain, but the medical treatment he received was late and erratic. Despite his obvious suffering, he refused hospitalization, determined not to appear weak in front of the press. His pride, his fear of being seen as vulnerable, kept him from getting the care he desperately needed. By the time he was admitted to the hospital, it was too late. His body had already begun to fail. Valentino's death was officially ruled a natural cause, but the autopsy showed a different picture. A man whose body had been silently failing for weeks. A body that had endured much more than the public ever saw. Hollywood may have preserved his image, but in the end, his body spoke the truth of his suffering. These autopsies didn't just reveal the cause of death. They exposed the silent confessions of stars whose lives had been hidden from the public. Scars that no makeup could cover, injuries that no contract could erase, and lives that were far darker than the roles they played on screen. In Hollywood, the script may end, but the body never lies. These forensic reports, though buried and hidden, have revealed the truth that even the most powerful studios couldn't suppress. So as we leave these stories behind, remember that the bodies of these Hollywood legends still have much to tell us. Their deaths, their struggles, their pain. This is the truth that lies beneath the surface of a world we thought we understood. If this video left you questioning what we never saw on screen, don't hesitate to subscribe and join us as we keep digging deeper into the truth behind the stars. Because on this channel, idols aren't buried, they're uncovered, one hidden story at a time.